A motorhome pulls into a campsite and shuts off its engine. Then the roof begins to rise. Hydraulic rams lift the entire upper structure into the air. Glass walls unfold and lock into place, and a full second story appears where there was only a roof 60 seconds earlier. A balcony extends above the driver's cab, and inside, the owner steps into a small working single-person elevator and rides it to the second floor. This is not a render, and it is not a concept. It is a production vehicle called the SAIC Maxus Lifehome V90 Villa Edition. And in China, it was priced at roughly $413,000 in a market where the European flagships it gets compared to sell for $3 million. The elevator is not the story. The number on the invoice is, and it was written by China's largest state-owned automaker. So this video answers two questions. First, how does a company actually build a two-story motorhome for a seventh of what Europe charges? And second, should the people building those $3 million motorhomes be worried? Because the honest answer to that second question is more interesting than the viral clips suggest. Start with what this vehicle actually is, because almost none of the coverage gets that right. The V90 Villa Edition is not new. SAIC Maxus revealed it in October of 2020 at a launch event built around a simple idea, showing how far the company's customization program could go. The internet has been rediscovering it ever since. Every year or so, the transformation footage resurfaces and goes viral all over again. And every time, the serious questions go unasked. That is the gap this video exists to close. Underneath, the Villa Edition is a Class C motorhome built on the Maxus V90, a large delivery van platform SAIC sells across Asia and beyond. The standard Lifehome V90 camper on that same base is a fairly ordinary machine priced around $70,000. Hold on to that number, it matters later. The Villa Edition is that same platform pushed as far as the engineering will go. Parked, it deploys in stages. First, two hydraulic slide-outs push the ground floor walls outward, opening the interior to about 215 square feet, the footprint of a small studio apartment, with a lounge, a kitchen with an induction cooktop and oven, a wet bathroom, and heated floors. Then the roof itself lifts. Tempered glass panels rise and lock into a full-height second story of about 133 square feet, a glass tea room with views in every direction, and walls that can switch to opaque for privacy. One of those panels, at the back of the room, is a transparent OLED display. Screen off, it is a window. Screen on, the wall itself becomes the television. There is a small walkout balcony above the cab, and connecting the two floors, instead of a ladder, instead of a staircase, there is that elevator. At launch, nobody in the industry could point to another production motorhome that had one. And as engineering, understand that the elevator is actually the easy part. The hard part is everything around it. A rigid glass second story means mass carried high on a vehicle that still has to corner, brake, and hold a highway lane. So the entire upper structure has to stow low and lock down for travel, then seal against rain and wind once it rises. Wind loading on a deployed glass room is exactly why nobody else sells one. The penalty math has always killed the idea. SAIC's answer was a van maker's answer. Heavy-duty hydraulics and structural hardware of the kind a giant industrial manufacturer can source at industrial prices, bolted to a platform cheap enough to absorb the experiment. To be clear about sourcing, those specifications come from SAIC's launch materials and the trade press that covered the reveal. The company has never published full technical data in English, no official curb weight for the Villa specification, no drivetrain breakdown. That silence matters, and we will come back to it. But first, the money. Because the price is where this vehicle stops being a curiosity and becomes a problem for an entire industry. At the top of the European market sits the Marchi Mobile eleMMent Palazzo Superior, built in Austria. 45 feet long, up to 732 square feet inside once the walls extend, a 600 horsepower Volvo engine, and a hydraulic sky lounge that rises out of the roof, complete with heated floors and built-in furniture. Marchi does not publish a list price. The consistently reported figure is around $3 million, and the company builds to order, one vehicle at a time, around a single customer. Then there is Germany. The Volkner Performance S is roughly 40 feet of hand-finished coachwork from a family firm, with a party trick of its own, a hydraulic garage in its belly, sized for a supercar. Volkner's base price is about $2.4 million. The show unit that made headlines at the Dusseldorf Caravan Salon carried a Bugatti Chiron in that garage and a Burmester sound system worth $355,000 on its own, a complete package priced near $7.7 million. And to be fair to the math, roughly $3 million of that was the car. Even in America, the ceiling is high. EarthRoamer, the Colorado company that defines the United States expedition vehicle market, lists its current flagships between roughly $840,000 and $1.2 million out the door for a single-story vehicle built on a Ford Super Duty chassis. Now, put the V90 Villa Edition on that map. At roughly $413,000, it costs about 1/7 of the Marchi, about 1/6 of the Volkner before the Bugatti even enters the garage, and the American benchmark costs 2 to 3 times as much for one story. Here is the part that tells you how carelessly this story has been covered. Some of the viral videos have called the V90 less than half the price of the European flagships. Less than half. The real gap is 1/7. The single most shareable fact this vehicle has, and the coverage undersold it by a factor of 3, because nobody stopped to do the division. Now, honesty requires saying what the Europeans are actually selling, because it is not nothing. A Marchi or a Volkner is built by hand, to order, around one customer, genuine scarcity, and scarcity is always priced like this. The V90 comes from the opposite universe, a mass production van platform, industrial hydraulics, and a component supply chain shared across millions of vehicles. Remember that $70,000 standard model? That is what an industrial base looks like, and the Villa Edition is best understood as that machine with hydraulics and glass stacked on top, not as a hand-built rival that somehow costs less. The Europeans sell craft. SAIC sells engineering at scale. And the question this vehicle forces is brutal in its simplicity. How much is craft worth? One scale can do this. To understand why that question lands so hard, look at who built this thing. SAIC is not a startup, and it is not an RV company that got ambitious. It is China's largest state-owned automaker, a Shanghai giant founded in 1955 that runs the joint ventures building Volkswagens and Buicks for the Chinese market, and owns brands like MG and Maxus outright. For years, it was China's best-selling automaker, full stop, until BYD finally overtook it in 2024. It still moved roughly 4.5 million vehicles in 2025, more than Ford, more than Honda. And in May of this year, it delivered its 100 millionth vehicle, the first Chinese automotive group ever to reach that milestone. Maxus is its commercial arm, vans, pickups, people movers, and, quietly, an entire family of factory-built RVs, from pop-top camper vans to conventional Class C motorhomes. The Villa Edition sits on top of that family as a statement piece, proof of what the platform can do when cost stops being the first constraint. If that pattern feels familiar, it should. Platform sharing, vertical integration, relentless scale, and a flagship product priced to embarrass the incumbents. That is the exact playbook. Chinese automakers ran in electric cars, and it carried them from novelty to the top of the global export charts in under a decade. And the motorhome version of that story is already in motion. In 2023, a Chinese RV maker called Dedel did something almost theatrical. Instead of shipping its vehicles to Europe's biggest RV show, the Caravan Salon in Dusseldorf, its team drove them there, roughly 13,000 kilometers, about 8,000 miles, from China to Germany. They returned the following year with a full carbon fiber motorhome called the Carbonic Liner, signed a German importer, and became the first Chinese RV brand to launch in Germany, with show visitors queuing at the stand every day to get inside. One Chinese two-story motorhome is a curiosity. A state automaker's RV division, plus a carbon fiber upstart driving 8,000 miles to Dusseldorf, is a pattern. Which brings us to the part of this story the viral clips never touch, and the reason your local RV dealer is not panicking yet. You cannot buy a V90 Villa Edition in the United States. You cannot buy one in Europe either. More than 5 years after the reveal, it remains a China market vehicle. It does not even appear on SAIC Maxus's English language website. That $400,000 figure is a China price, and nobody has demonstrated what this vehicle would cost, or weigh, or require, once it had to meet Western rules. Those rules are the real moat. A motorhome sold in America or Europe has to pass crash and roadworthiness certification, fit weight classes that decide what license can drive it, and stand behind a warranty with a service network that actually exists. None of that has been announced for the V90. Even Dedel, the company that drove to Dusseldorf, is entering Europe the realistic way, with smaller certified models through a local importer, starting from around 150,000 euros, not its wildest flagship first. So here is the verdict, plainly. The V90 Villa Edition is not about to take a single sale from Marchi, Volkner, or EarthRoamer, because you cannot buy it where those companies sell. What it has already done is quieter and more corrosive. It collapsed the assumption that flagship motorhome engineering has to cost millions. Every buyer who watches a glass second story rise on a $400,000 vehicle now understands that the $3 million price tag is a choice, a business model, not a law of physics. Pricing umbrellas rarely survive that kind of knowledge forever. And to be practical about who this actually affects, if you are shopping this segment today, nothing changes for you yet. The V90 is not an option in the West, and the established builders remain the only game in town. The people who should be recalculating are the builders themselves, especially the mid-tier European brands whose prices lean on the assumption that nobody can undercut craft with engineering. That assumption now has a counterexample with a 100 million vehicle parent company behind it. So the disruption is real, but the timeline is not the one the viral clips imply. Watch the trade shows, not the showrooms. The day a vehicle like this appears at the Caravan Salon with European certification and a service contract behind it, this stops being a warning shot. Until then, that is exactly what it is, a warning shot fired by a company that builds 4.5 million vehicles a year and has already shown in electric cars precisely what it does after firing one. Here is the question to leave you with, and I genuinely want your answer. If both were parked in your driveway tomorrow, titled and road legal, the $400,000 two-story V90 or the $3 million hand-built Marchi, which one would you actually trust for the next 10 years on the road? Drop your pick in the comments. And if this kind of analysis is what you come to YouTube for, subscribe. There is a lot more in the vault. Thanks for watching.